building tour. We'll go ahead and get started with an introduction. Welcome. I want to thank you all for taking an hour of your day to spend with us and just taking time to expose yourself to LEED building and green energy and harmonious living with the environment. So as I said, today we are here with Barry Febos, our green energy educator.
Hi.
There he is. And again, my name is Rhianne. I'm 21 Acres Administrative Assistant. So here's a bit about 21 Acres. 21 Acres is a living laboratory which serves to educate our communities around climate change and how to participate in climate action. And we do this by promoting and building resilient food systems that are rooted in agroecology, regenerative farming, and sustainable land stewardship. And we also promote adoption of sustainable living and building practices, which you will see today. 21 Acres is located in Woodinville, Washington, on the ancestral lands of Indigenous nations, including the Stillaguamish tribe, the Duwamish, and Coast Salish peoples. And we greatly appreciate and acknowledge these nations as the original stewards of this land. And we honor both the land itself and the Coast Salish peoples, past and present. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it back to Barry and unspotlight me. So we can get started with the tour.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'll lift my mask down for a minute so you can see what I look like. Thanks so much for being here. There's some folks walking through periodically, and got our facilities manager here as well, who's helping do some support for the tour. But yeah, my name is Barry Febos. I'm the energy manager and educator here at 21 Acres. And my role is to kind of use our building as a platform for educating people about green building climate solutions, essentially. And Rhianne touched on our kind of overarching mission here at 21 Acres. But just to kind of reinforce that a little bit, we're primarily focused on supporting local food systems and regenerative, sustainable agricultural practices. And we have a LEED Platinum building here to also focus on green building education. And we look at all these things as climate solutions. And that's kind of the lens that we're looking at everything through. So thinking about the best ways that we can impact climate change. Buildings account for about 40% of carbon emissions globally. So that's part of why we're focused on green building. And then agriculture has some substantial impacts as well, but it's also a really amazing solution. So it can, through doing regenerative agricultural practices, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the tour, you can actually pull carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in healthy agricultural soils. So that's why we have the farm here, to kind of demonstrate some of those practices and support local food systems, have volunteers come out to learn about farming, students, and have farm tours as well. If you're interested in the farm tour, we usually have them on the 4th Saturday of the month, which would be next Saturday. I'm not sure what's happening with the Thanksgiving holiday.
We're still having the farm tour. Yeah, and it's actually Emily's birthday, our education lead. So she's really excited to spend her birthday doing what she loves.
Yeah, Emily is great. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about the farm, you can ask questions about the farm on the building tour, but I would definitely encourage you, if you're into that, to check out the tour next Saturday as well. And check out our virtual learning page, which has some other video resources and other ways of learning about what we do here. So yeah, we have the farm, which is 18 acres of our property. We are 21 acres of property, which is where the name comes from. And then the front 3 is a building and grounds, which we'll kind of look a little bit more at here in a minute. But just to give some background on our building, which is the main focus of what we'll be talking about here today, LEED certification is something I kind of just want to cover to make sure everyone's familiar. So LEED stands for, sitting in front of our LEED Platinum plaque. Platinum is the highest LEED certification you can get. There's also just LEED certified, LEED silver, and LEED gold. And you get points for different features in your building. So it's a pretty flexible certification. Oh, and LEED itself stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it's the Green Building Certification Program of the US Green Building Council, and one of the most widely adopted green building certifications. And I think that's really one of the strengths of LEED, is how many people it's kind of brought into green building, because it's a flexible certification and it's widely known. And there's a lot of ways that you can get points for it. So, there's things that might come to mind when you think about green building, like having really good insulation in your walls or having solar panels on your roof. You can definitely get points for those things. You can also get points for having materials that don't emit VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, so paints that don't put off fumes and other finishes like that, and recycled materials, all kinds of things. And then things you might not think of, but having a bike rack or having access to public transit, those things can greatly impact the sustainability of a building. So you can get points for that. So LEED's flexible in that way. You can still get points, even if you might not have a really good access to a solar exposure or the resources to do, renewable energy and things like that on site. There's still other ways you can get points. How you prepare the site, if you have a minimal impact there, if you get materials locally, all these kinds of things are things that kind of go into thinking about green building and the impact of buildings. So that's kind of an overview about LEED. And yeah, I guess just to also touch on a little bit more on the climate impact of buildings. So I mentioned 40% of global emissions. And another reason that's become, I feel like, even more visible lately, that climate change is a really important issue, is because, so it's an environmental issue, obviously. It affects the planet, but it also impacts people who, like vulnerable communities, people that tend to be lower resourced, communities of color. And so it's also a social justice issue. And those communities tend to have the least responsibility for climate change, but suffer some of the first and worst impacts. So I just want to recognize that, and the urgency of climate change on multiple levels. And I feel like we've seen that a lot this year. And yeah, so that's kind of the background. And as we keep going here, I wanted to point out, before we head outside and look at some of the features, look at our building energy use. And to do that, I'm going to show our display here, which is a system called eGauge. Try and center it here. So this, if you can see the mouse, I'll try and zoom in a little bit here. I don't know if you can see the mouse, but that top red line is our overall building energy use. And then you can see over in the corner, there's a little green section, and that's our solar production. And then
Do you want to get a little bit closer to the screen?
I can try, yeah.
I know, right? It might be hard with your self-filming.
Yeah. Oops.
Okay, that looks really, that
You
looks
can
good.
see
It's a
a
little
little better, a
tilted,
little
but
crooked, yeah. So it's a little tricky. But essentially, yeah, this is showing our overall building energy use. And I'm gonna click on, or have some assistance here to click on our 5-ton heat pump, or 10-ton right there. So, and if we could also show the energy used, that would be great. Okay. So you might be able to see, I'm gonna kind of zoom in here, these little check marks. That shows our heating system. And you can see the overall power has gone up when our heating system comes on. We have a ground source heat pump, so it's a very efficient heating system, but it still uses electricity. But basically what eGauge does is it allows us to see, so this is just one thing that we're monitoring, but we're also monitoring pretty much all of the major significant loads in the building, things that use energy. And it enables us to be able to see where we're using the most energy and reduce that energy. Because if you don't know what you're using, you can't really do too much about it or where you're using it. And the reason that I like to bring this up is that there's a lot of affordable ways of doing this at home these days. So smart speakers like Alexa and there's others, but come with plugs so you can adjust your lighting and things like that if you plug a light into the smart plug. But those smart plugs can also monitor energy use, and you can get an app for your phone that will actually show you how much energy they're using. And they're very affordable for just a few dollars. You can get some of these smart plugs. If you were going to be installing or having your electrical panel worked on, you could install a full building system like we have here. We installed this in our electrical panel so we can submeter all the different systems throughout the building and things that aren't even plugged into the wall but are hardwired. And often people do that when they have a solar array so they can see how much solar production they have. But for us, you can see today, right now, it's fairly sunny out. We're using a fair amount of electricity because we have some heat happening. But because this area is green, that means we're actually sending energy back to the grid right now. And we're sending about 16.7 kilowatts back. So everything we don't use from our solar array goes out to the grid. And I think that's a pretty good segue to head outside and actually see what's happening on the roof. But I'm going to pause here for a minute and see if we have any questions so far about energy monitoring or anything I've mentioned so far.
Nothing in the chat yet, but definitely feel comfortable. Folks, you can either unmute your microphone or you can share in the chat and I can speak those to Barry. I didn't know about the Alexa, like the apps that monitor energy. That is awesome. I'd really like to do some research on that. And
yeah, maybe we can make a little how-to guide for folks at some point. But yeah, I just wanted to do kind of a little pan around the outside here so you can see out beyond that tree line that I'm showing right now is our farm. If you check out the farm tour, you get a little closer look at that. And then down there is our parking lot. And as we step out onto the terrace, you can get a closer look at the building from the outside. And some of the features like the solar array up there. Oops, sorry, getting a little crooked. That's Kelly, our facilities manager, helping out behind the scenes. So yeah, I like to start here when we're standing outside because you can see the solar array. We have a 26 kilowatt solar array, and that's about enough power to power 2 to 3 average American homes. For us, because we have a market where we sell produce from local farms and other locally made products, it only covers about 15 to 25% of our electric use throughout the year. But in the summertime, on a sunny day, we're typically sending energy back to the grid as we are right now. I'm seeing a question from Joshua. Could you read that to me, Rhianne?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Joshua. He asked, do you feel these monitors will bring more of an aptness to help global issues, or what do you believe to be the effectiveness of the monitors? Okay, wait, sorry. Do you feel these monitors will bring more of an aptness to help global environment issues, or what do you believe the effectiveness is of those monitors? And are you asking about the eGauge monitors?
sounds that way to me.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, well, I think they're really important for building energy use, which is the main way that buildings use energy. So I'm just going to turn the camera back around here. Turn back to the building so you can still see solar. But yeah, the biggest usage of energy from buildings, I think around 80 to 90% comes in the operation of the building. So heating systems and electrical use in the building. And the monitoring is incredibly important for being able to identify where the biggest areas of use are and then reduce them. So I think that's a really important technology. And it's just becoming more and more affordable as digital technology improves, and you're seeing things like smart plugs and that kind of thing. So I think it'll definitely help raise awareness. And it also is something people can learn from. You know, when I share this at a staff meeting and show the elevator usage, for example, some people were like, "Oh, I didn't, realize how much energy the elevator uses. Ours is really efficient." But some people started using the stairs a little bit more after that. And so I think it can really help raise awareness in terms of building usage. Yeah, so I hope that kind of covers that question. But I'm going to return to, talking a bit about the solar array. So yeah, like I mentioned, about 2 to 3 average American homes. Because we're a fairly large commercial building, for us, it's about 15% of our annual usage. But like I said, we do produce more on a sunny day than we're actually using, and we send it back to the grid. We also have a living roof up there, and I can switch to showing you a 3D view from up on the roof, because we don't get very good cell service when I head up there. But the living roof is a really important feature as well, in terms of not only kind of passively insulating the building with the soil. In the winter time or summertime, it can actually help to cool the building through evapotranspiration. And it's a impermeable surface, so water can kind of gradually percolate down through the living roof, whereas it would just run off of a roof and kind of overwhelm stormwater systems and create drainage problems and erosion and other things along those lines. And then another kind of more basic type of solar energy that we utilize in the building is utilized through what we call passive solar design. And you may have heard about this, but if you see this area of the building behind me here, you see that really dark shadow above the windows, and you'll notice it's getting into close to wintertime here, and it's intentional that the shadow is above the windows. So that roof overhang is specifically designed so that in the wintertime, when the sun is lower in the sky, the light comes straight in these windows, and we get all that solar energy to help heat the building passively. And then in the summertime, when the sun rises higher in the sky, around this time of day, you'll actually see the shadow right below these windows, all the way at the bottom of the wall. So we're not getting very much of that solar energy into the windows, and the building can stay cooler. And there's a trellis. You can see this kind of bar structure up here that's designed to hold vines as well, which would leaf out in the summertime to help enhance that effect. And then the leaves die back in the winter to allow the sun to come in. So passive solar designs, very cost-effective and simple way, if you have good southern exposure and a well-insulated building, to passively heat your house in the wintertime and still keep it cool in the summer. So another thing that helps with that is the walls, which are well insulated with a recycled building material that's called a insulated concrete form. And if we walk over here, I can show you an example right here. Maybe move it onto this chair so you can see it a little better. There we go. So this is what they look like. It's kind of looks like a Lego block, really. And the entire building, the exterior walls of the building are made out of this structure. And it kind of fits together like Lego blocks. And it's made from these ones that we built the building out of are 50% recycled styrofoam. So in the construction of this building, 17,000 pounds of styrofoam were kept out of the landfill. So that's a pretty awesome reduction. And then the way these work is that these little plastic notches in the middle is where the rebar goes. So you put the metal rebar in there, and then concrete gets poured in between the block, and you build your walls that way. So you don't actually have to build forms, concrete forms that you then take down, which is typically how concrete construction is done. You can just build the walls with these forms, and they stay in place, and you pour the concrete in there. And because we also use a product called Apex Block, where there's recycled styrofoam mixed into the cement of the block itself, we were able to reduce the amount of cement that went into this building significantly. So it was about 575 fewer cubic yards of cement were used in this building than in a conventional one. And cement also uses a lot of energy to be produced, so that's a significant energy savings as well. Yeah, so that's covers some of the kind of solar and energy features of the outside of the building that are great to talk about while we're out here. But another really cool thing while we're on the patio is the way that we think about water. So we're standing on a terrace, but it's not completely paved. It's made with permeable pavers. So you see all the cracks between the pavers here. They allow water to percolate down through. And you'll also notice that you probably won't be able to see it from up here, but down in our parking lot, the entire parking lot is also paved with permeable pavers. So water can percolate down through instead of overwhelming stormwater systems like I talked about before. There's also bioswales. So if you look kind of on the far side of the parking lot, behind those orange cones, there's a low-lying area that's designed to capture rainwater and runoff and then direct it back towards our wetland restoration project, which is at the far end of that gravel lot, if you can see it. And then there's also these rain gardens, which this bushy area over here is a rain garden. And so lots of water-loving plants are planted in there. And the bioswales, which surround the entire front of the property, drain into the rain garden and into the wetland restoration area. And plants can actually take up any toxins that make their way into the water from runoff from cars in the parking lot or anything like that. Plants can actually convert into their biomass. So even things like heavy metals, they can take up and turn into plant material and clean up the water in that way. So we don't get any of that stuff going into the water, or at least significantly less. So that's some of the ways that rainwater and stormwater were thought about in this project. But another cool thing, you might be able to hear these. There's like a low hum that these make. This is our wastewater treatment system, which is integrated into the building or into the site here. We don't have any connection to city sewers. So all of our wastewater is treated here on site through a biological process. So there's no chemicals added. It's just bacteria that basically eat all the pathogens that are in the water. In the first stage, it sits in a tank in an anaerobic environment. And the second stage, air gets pumped into the water, and that's what, if you can hear it at all, there's a blower running, which is pumping air through the water. And then it makes its way across the lawn here and out to the farm where we have these things called Glendon Bio Filters, which the water percolates up through the sand box and gets cleaned at a final stage by the beneficial bacteria in the sand boxes in the Glendon Bio Filters. So those are some of the water related things in the property, but our biggest source of water savings in the building
Sometimes we lose service on the outside part. Sorry about that, everybody. But thanks again. If you have any questions so far, if you wanted to type them into the chat, feel free to, or you can speak them at any time as well. Oh, Barry, you're back.
Oh, did you lose me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. What was the last thing you heard me say?
You were saying water features inside the building save a lot of
Oh, yeah.
water.
So while we were talking about water and the pavers and the bioswales and rain gardens, the biggest source of water savings from inside the building is our composting toilets. And we'll get to that a little bit later in the tour. And I can show you the composter units. But I just want to mention it now because our building overall uses about 80% less water than a conventional building of its size. And that's mostly attributed to our composting toilets. Toilets tend to be the biggest water users in most buildings. So yeah, awesome thing to consider as well. Any questions about solar or the living roof or water related things while we're out here? Okay. Well, feel free to share them in the chat if questions come up or speak up. But I'm going to try and switch over to a 3D view of the roof so you can see a little closer. This is the first time that we're trying this, so bear with me for a second. You can see our living roof and our solar panels a little more closely. Okay. So, all right. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Okay. Doesn't appear to be, oh, okay. Let me change it to the setting, yeah. So this is what it looks like up on the roof when you're standing there. So you can get a better view of the living roof, which is hard to see from down here. So I just wanted to be able to show you. It's planted with a lot of sedums and succulents, plants that do really well in a dry environment, so that we don't have to do a lot of irrigation. We do a little bit of irrigation in the just for 10 minutes a day in the driest part of the summer, but it's pretty minimal. And yeah, the living roof has a lot of benefits as well, bringing beneficial insects to the property. And we also get Canada geese that nest up here in the springtime, and the little goslings hop along the roof and plop down, make their way down to the river that's at the edge of our property. So that's pretty awesome. I'm just gonna scroll around so you can see there's 2 pitches of a solar array, one that you can't really see from down here, but this is one, and then this is the other. Together it's 26 kilowatts. And when we head into the building, I'm going to talk about these, the Skylight Panels, which are that white section of panels that you see in between the solar panels there. Those are made from a really cool super insulated Skylight panel that I can show you when we head in. All right, cool. Going to get myself back to the Zoom now. Stop the share. All right, then we'll head into the building.
I just wanted to share about how cool the geese are that choose to lay on our roof and in other parts of our, like our of the terrace. There's like a garden planter that we try to keep them away from because there's quite a steep drop on the other side of it, but they will lay their eggs there every year and harass me when I'm at the front desk and harass everyone who comes in. But they're not that mean. It's just so incredible to know how important it is to, respect the built environment and how it synthesizes with biodiversity. And it actually, it keeps them from laying in our farm a little bit, at least maybe 2 or 3 geese out of the hundreds that flock to the middle of the valley here. But yeah, it's just interesting to know you can impact so much with this kind of roofing system and other natural things you incorporate into your built environment.
Totally. Thanks for sharing that, Rhianne. Yeah, it is pretty awesome to have the geese here, although they can, sometimes they'll dive bomb you a little bit when they're first starting to nest. But overall, it's really an awesome thing. So I just want to, I'm going to turn the camera around here and give you a little view of the inside of this room. And this is a great place to talk about lighting. So you can see some of these high windows up here on the south side of the building. These are called clear story windows. And they allow us to get a lot more daylight into the building, which allows us to use less electricity, because lighting is one of the biggest users of electricity in buildings, commercial buildings. So, and you can see up here, there's some clear story windows as well. And then those skylights from the inside, you can see bringing a lot of daylight in also. And we'll try turning on the lights. We also have an automated lighting system. So we'll see if the lights, oh, they do come on, because there's maybe not quite enough light in the building yet. But they're designed to turn off when we have enough light coming in. And that's controlled by, if you look up on this panel, on this rafter here, you can see a little white box at the top, which actually has a solar sensor attached to it, and that controls whether the lights come on or not. And there's also a timer, so they may still be sensing. But they're also controlled by, you see a little white box in this corner, which is a motion sensor. So as long as there's no people in the room consistently, I just turn them on, so they stay on for a little while, but they'll eventually go through a cycle, and I'm moving around in the room. So it's sensing my movement and my body heat and keeping the lights on. But if there was no one in here, the lights would automatically turn off after a few minutes. And this can save a huge amount of energy in commercial buildings, because people don't always remember to turn the lights off. So automation can really be a big source of energy savings. And daylighting can bring a lot of beauty into a building and also help save on energy. Turn the camera back around here and talk about cow wall panel. So this panel here is a sample of what the Skylight material is made out of. It's called cow wall. And inside this panel is a nanogel material, which is a super insulating material. Basically, the way it works is the more kind of tiny air bubbles you can fit into a material, the more trapped air or trapped gases, the better it's going to be at insulating or resisting heat flow going through it. The way that insulating materials are rated is R value, or resistance to heat flow. So the average wall of a standard building these days, like 2x6 wall, is R20 about. And the newest cow wall panel that they make can actually have that same insulating value as a wall that doesn't have any windows in it. So it's pretty miraculous that a material that can bring as much light as you're seeing there into a building can also insulate as well as an exterior wall. This building was constructed or opened in 2011 and constructed earlier than that. So the R20 product wasn't yet available, but these are still probably 2 to 5 times as efficient as a energy efficient window. So like the most energy efficient windows you can get on the market now, they're rated in U value, but the R value equivalent for them is, I think the highest you can get is around a 5. And that's like a really super efficient window. And the average window is usually around an R1. So to have something 20 times as efficient as a window is pretty awesome. Yeah, so that's a little bit about lighting and the various ways that we're kind of able to save energy that way. And we also have these solar screens. If you look over here, There's actually a solar screen in this window, but you can still see out very clearly. When you're outside looking in, all you see is kind of a white fabric, and it blocks a lot of the solar gain. So in the summertime, when we don't want a lot of heat coming in, we can block more of it that way with these solar screens. Yeah. Any questions about lighting or anything I'm showing you all in here while we're here? All right. Okay. Yes. So I had my mask off because there was no one in that room for a long time, but I'm heading back into the building where there may be some people around. It's pretty quiet on Saturdays, but no one around at the moment. But I'll keep it on anyhow. So we're heading into the kitchen now, and I'll give you a little view of the space in here. So this is our education kitchen, where, you know, one of the most important things that we're talking about here at 21 Acres is regenerative agriculture and the benefits of local food. And the kind of the heart of that, you know, where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, is where you're actually using the food, cooking and eating. And so we host cooking classes here under normal times. We're doing a lot of blogging and things about recipes and sharing virtually as much as we can at the moment. But this is a space that we use for doing cooking classes, also making prepared foods for the market downstairs, and all focused on local ingredients. And one of the simplest things that anyone can do to kind of help support as a climate solution is to support local regenerative agriculture. And that means practices that are helping to build soil health. So yeah, anything that you can do to make your farm have healthier soil, essentially. So things like growing cover crops or reducing the amount that you till your soils, and yeah, adding compost and other organic material that can help build that carbon into the soil. But the main way that happens is just the plants themselves. When they photosynthesize, they're actually pulling CO2 out of the air and using it to build their biomass underground. And that's actually able to sequester carbon into agriculture soils. So this is seen as a major climate solution. And yeah, that's one of the biggest reasons that we're kind of pushing local sustainable practices. And you know, things that you don't always think about when you're thinking about eating locally are, you know, some flavors are hard to get locally. So here in the Pacific Northwest, it's a little too cold to grow citrus, but there's other alternatives that we try to incorporate into the education in our cooking classes and such, like using sumac. It grows a red bud that can be used to make a very tart lemonade-like drink, or you can add it to food to add that tart flavor to it, similar to citrus. You can use apple cider vinegar, and there's other alternatives there as well. And then one of the biggest things is just using local honey instead of sugar that's shipped in from South America. So we actually have an apiary out on the farm. If you are able to join us for the farm tour, we can show some of that, or check out some of our virtual education. There's some good bee videos there as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about the education that happens in here. But in terms of sustainable materials and the LEED certification in the building here, I'm standing right in front of some samples of product that's used for the countertop. I can do a little close up so you can see it. It's called paper stone. And you can kind of see the texture there. And here are some of the samples. You can get it in all different colors, but it's made from recycled paper and hazelnut resin, and it's a product that's produced locally here in the Seattle area, and it's temperature rated up to 375 degrees, so you can put a hot pan on it and it's not going to mess it up. You can cut it with a conventional saw, so you don't have to have a stone countertop specialist install it for you. And the material is cost competitive with stone counters. So it's a really cool alternative material. If you're in the Seattle area, Green Home Solutions is a place that you can source this material. But yeah, paper stone's cool product. You also see the paneling here on the edge of the counter is made from bamboo, which is a rapidly renewable material. It's a fast-growing grass, so every time you cut it down, it grows right back, produces more biomass, and actually sequesters that carbon from the plant into the building material. So, you know, it's used a lot in flooring. People make cutting boards out of it, all kinds of things these days. And then another really important thing to consider in kitchens and homes is getting energy efficient appliances. So you'll see this Energy Star logo on our Alto Sham here. That's the energy rating program of the Department of Energy. So all appliances that are meet certain efficiency requirements get certified as Energy Star. So all of our appliances that we can get certified in this way, we have. And in particular, our fridge and freezer are highly efficient. Refrigeration is one thing that we focus a lot on here. Our freezer actually uses propane refrigerant instead of conventional refrigerants, which has a very low greenhouse gas potential, whereas conventional refrigerants are thousands of times more potent than CO2. But propane is actually better at refrigerating and uses less, has a much lower greenhouse gas impact, very low. And then here in our hood is actually temperature controlled, which is another automation feature. So demand controlled ventilation is what it's called. So in a conventional kitchen, as long as people are in the kitchen working, oftentimes the vent hood is turned on and running all the time. But in this kitchen, it only turns on when it actually senses heat. So when you're using the oven or one of the stovetops, does the ventilation system kick on at around 90 degrees. And that can save a huge amount of energy. And our full building ventilation system is also controlled by CO2 sensors that essentially monitor how much air people are breathing out in the room, and that figures out how many people are in the space and how much ventilation you need. So instead of in a conventional building where you're just ventilating for maximum occupancy all the time, you just ventilate for the number of people and the amount of usage you actually have in the building. So that's pretty cool. Saves a big amount of energy. Any questions about kitchen related things or anything really that's we've talked about on the tour before we move on? I know we're starting to get, yeah, I've got about 15 minutes left here. Okay. Well, because the next segments of the tour are in places that we don't have very good Wi-Fi reception, I'm going to switch again to the 3D building tour here so we can look at our compost room and our mechanical room and talk about the systems that are in there. Just bear with me a moment. Okay. So back on the living roof, and if we go back one screen, here we are in the compost room. So yeah, like I said, our composting toilets are the largest source of water savings in the building. And this is what the receptacles where the compost or the waste actually comes down through our composting toilets winds up going. And it's made by a company called Clevis Multrum. They're one of the biggest, one of the original and one of the most substantial compost toilet manufacturers in the country and in the world. And it's a fairly simple system. Essentially, there's a layer of wood shavings that's piled inside the container when you start. The bottom of the container, as you can kind of see on the one on the right here, has a sloped edge, so the bottom follows that slope. So all the material that's the oldest comes towards the front, and that's been broken down the most. And once it needed to be emptied, which we still haven't had to empty ours, and typically these systems will last about like more than 10 years before you have to empty it, or at least the one, they have the same exact units at the facility at the Bronx Zoo, which gets a lot of foot traffic, and after 10 years they still haven't had to empty theirs. Ours are probably about maybe 2/3 full at this point. And the only maintenance we really have to do is to open the hatch at the top there and rake the material out about once a month and add a little bit more wood shavings, which we have there on top of the containers. And you'll notice a couple of milk jugs there. And I don't know if I can't zoom in, but those are to illustrate the difference between a conventional toilet and one of our toilets. So the 2 milk jugs is about an average flush from a conventional toilet, anywhere from 1 to 3 gallons. And then there's a little jar you'll see on the right there, and that piece of blue tape that's taped to it below that line is 3 ounces. And that's the amount of water that our toilets use, because they have a foam flushing agent, which uses just a tiny bit of 3 ounces of water per flush. So effectively, we get about a 95 to 98% reduction in water use from our toilets, and overall 80% less water used in the building. And then at the end, when we actually have to empty the toilets, or the receptacles where all the waste goes, it can be, in Washington State, you can apply biosolids which is what composted human waste is considered biosolids. And it gets tested for pathogens. And then we'd probably just apply it to landscaping here, but it can actually be applied to farm soils as well, if it meets the correct standard and doesn't have any dangerous pathogens in it, which it typically doesn't. But yeah, that's kind of the summary here. There's also, if you look up here, you'll see these little pipes coming out the top. One of those is for the material coming down. The other one is a ventilation pipe, and you'll see a little motor or fan that's in line. It's a high efficiency fan that just draws a vacuum, so you don't get any bad smells coming up through the toilets. They get exhausted out through the roof. And that's more or less it. We have questions about composting toilets or anything that's come up on the tour so far?
While we wait for questions, could you could you share about the red wriggler worms?
Oh yeah, I forgot. I almost forgot.
How
Not
could
being
you forget
physically
the worms? No, I'm just kidding.
in the compost room, sometimes I forget. But yeah, so the way that the material breaks down, and the reason we haven't had to empty it, is because there's worms and bacteria that live in the wood chips or the wood shavings and the waste material that just keep breaking it down and breaking it down. And one of the most interesting jobs that my former boss, Melissa, had to do when she first started here at 21 Acres is she was asked to go out on the farm and dig up a couple shovelfuls of red wriggler worms and put a few of them in each of the toilets. And that was to get these community of worms going in the toilets. And now there's actually probably hundreds or thousands of worms living in there. It's a very healthy community of worms and bacteria that break down this material for us. And that's called an ecosystem service, when there's a kind of a natural system that provides beneficial environmental service for a building or anything really. All of the plants that are treating the water, our wastewater system, all kinds of things, our ecosystem services on the farm as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Sure.
I love that worm story about Melissa just dropping worms into the toilet. It's just so cool.
Yeah,
Ah.
it's a good one. Well, I guess, yeah, feel free to put questions into the chat. And we also use this room for storage. I just want to turn around because I'm not physically in the room, but I'm having fun with this 3D technology. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, this is our front lawn here, is heating from the earth. So our building is heated by a geothermal heat pump, which is buried underneath our lawn, which is what I'm showing here. And you can actually see an image of the pipes. This little, oops, can't get that text box out of the way, but you can see behind it a bunch of coils of pipe that are buried under the lawn in roughly that location. And those collect heat from underground. So the earth maintains a temperature around 55 degrees all year long. And that's because the sun radiates onto the earth and kind of heats it in that way. And you can actually capture that heat and use it to heat your building. So we go back one more slide here. We are in the mechanical room. And this unit here is our geothermal heat pump, the thing I just clicked on that turned blue. I'll unclick so you can see it again. But what that does is it takes the heat from the earth, which is coming in through these pipes. So the pipe that's kind of in the middle of the screen, right here, unclick so you can see it again. If we follow it up and up and up, goes along the roof line there, and then out and through the wall and into the hillside. And that connects to those coils that you saw under the lawn. And water circulates through there and captures the 55-degree temperature and circulates it into our heat pump here. And then the heat pump takes it and brings it up to around 90 degrees. And then it gets distributed to our radiant floors throughout the building. And because it's capturing that heat from the earth, and because the heat pump itself is a super efficient appliance, which kind of works like the reverse of an air conditioner. So if you ever touch the back of an air conditioner unit, you'll notice it's really hot. And we're basically capturing that heat. And these systems can be incredibly efficient. So for every unit of energy that you put into it, you can actually get 3.5 units out, which is pretty amazing. A conventional heating appliance like a gas-powered furnace or an oil-powered furnace, usually for every unit of energy you put into it, you get 0.9 units out. So you're losing a little bit of energy every time you use it. But every time we use our heat pump, we're actually gaining energy, which is kind of magical. So that saves a huge amount of electricity and energy for the building. And then these tanks that you see over here are buffer tanks, so that water gets preheated into those tanks, and then that water gets distributed throughout the building. There's a little diagram on the front of those tanks which kind of illustrate the sun heating the earth and then capturing that 55-degree temperature for heating the building. So yeah, that's the importance of geothermal heating. And one way to kind of apply this in our own lives, if you own a house, is that if you're ever replacing your heating system, you can get an air source heat pump. You can also get geothermal, which is becoming a lot more affordable. But air source heat pumps are always affordable, and they're a very efficient way to heat a building, probably the most efficient way. And as long as you're not in a super extreme climate that is below freezing, or sorry, below like gets into the teens regularly. So the Pacific Northwest is a great place to heat with heat pumps, air source heat pumps, which do a similar thing. They capture heat from the air and then bring it into the building. So yeah, So that covers everything that I wanted to show you on the tour today. But I'm definitely open to stay on here for questions. Um, and so I'll open the floor for anyone that wants to ask anything and come back to my Zoom video here. Well, I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. Despite not being able to have folks in person, it's really amazing to be able to share across the internet and have folks coming in from all around the country and around the world. So thanks so much for joining us. If you have questions that come up that you weren't able to ask now, you're welcome to reach me at barryf@21acres.org, or you can email our general information and email, and that'll make its way to me as well.
So glad that everyone can join us from their homes all over the states, I think, and some parts across in Europe. So really, really grateful that you were able to spend time with us today.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your Saturday.
Yes, enjoy. Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.